Okay, let's see if that fixes everything. Give me a moment. Testing. Okay, let's see here. Why we have this weird chipmunking effect? Okay, I'm gonna message one of our people here. Okay. Let's see if that fixes everything. Oh, we're in a delay. I think this works now. Okay. Testing. I see. Okay, so I just figured out the issue. The issue is that I believe the mic on the camera is terrible for this sort of capture. So I'm going to proceed as before. In the future, we're going to be doing more of this sort of testing type of stuff, so hang on to your butts there. Actually, I wonder if I can test this on different application, if that might actually give me a better result with the delay and everything. And of course, now we have a stupid video commercial. See, the worst part is that usually my audio people that are usually here are currently now they are currently elsewhere for the meantime. So let's see what's going on here. Yep, okay, so it does work. Got it. Alright, so I'm going to stop dilly-dallying, and we're going to do this now before hopefully the stream dies. But now I know, and knowing is half the battle. G.I. Joe. Okay, so I'm going for the third time, because third time's the charm, I'm going to recap on what our kind of rules are and what the show is. So first of all, if you hadn't seen our opening, welcome to the Masters of Unlocking. God, this is going to be a weird video to edit together when we get to the recording of it. Okay, so this show is going to be about locks. It's going to be about how locks work, different types of locks, how to manipulate them with and open them without using their keys, otherwise known as lock picking or lock sport, as well as ways to bypass their functions, cool tidbits, history, and just overall having fun with locks. Now, here's a few things to remember here. So first of all, despite this show's called Master Unlocking, and the organization I'm part of, that's called TOOL, that is TOOOL, that is TOOL with 3 letter O's, .us, because it's the United States version of TOOL. I am not considered a master under them, and I can pick locks well, and I often show up to TOOL meetings when they used to have these in person and teach people how to pick locks at their meetings and major hacker conventions and stuff like that. But to note that I am not, I am learning as much as you guys do every bit of every day. This show will happen every other Sunday, and it's going to, I probably will repeat this show again, or at least a part of it, even though I will have a backup edit. And every 2 Sundays, so the next Sunday, I believe that is going to be May 28th, since this is airing on May 10th, I am going to, now I'm in chat again, I am going to do this show. And part of the reasons why I'm doing it every 2 Sundays is because even if I order stuff in, it takes a week to order in, provided that's not in China, and I can go into details about China-U.S. relations later, because, you know, everything's politics now. But I just blanked out. I'm gonna take a sip of water. That's why I have this here. You're probably going to see me refill this guy a lot, because I have a lot to say on here. But that allows me 2 weeks that if I'm getting a new equipment to show to you guys, I will have that equipment. And next time I'll also be on time. Because essentially what happened is, not only did we have a few technical issues on the stream that I finally fixed, but it also does not help that when I was editing videos earlier for this stream, the video editor crashed, and thus it took my entire audio driver with it, so there was no audio for anything. So I had to restart everything, and that took like an hour, and bleh. But here we are now. Before I go into this for the 3rd time, since now we seem to have good audio, I am going to reiterate the 2 rules that even though I am a TOOL member, and I will note that you might see the TOOL logo in here, I'll show that off later, and that I am a TOOL member. This is not a TOOL broadcast. This is not TOOL sponsored. There's no one from TOOL here. This is entirely a DEF CON 201 thing. This is what I do at the in-person meetings. I bring this giant kit, and some of it you see here, and I teach people how to lock pick and do bypasses, and everyone practices. And again, I'm pretty good at that. But note, this is not sponsored by TOOL, however, or endorsed. However, I will reiterate 2 laws that they have, because this will not only protect their butts, but also my butts, and will protect your butt. And I think protecting everyone's butts during COVID is a good thing. So here are these 2 rules. First rule is never pick locks that you rely on. So when I teach you all this stuff, don't just start going through your house and like pick a lock that like you're like, hey, I have this lock that I use for my gym. I'm gonna do my lock picking techniques on this. When you lock pick, you can break your picks. You will also damage and wear out your lock. And if you're using it on a daily basis for like chaining your fence or your gym locker or your school locker, like schools are open right now during COVID, but you get what I mean. This will be bad because your lock will degrade and will eventually break, and then people can get in that way. And also, usually the more worn down a lock is, despite lube and stuff, it's easier to try to bypass and pick. So never pick locks that you rely on. Equally important, in my opinion even more important, is never pick locks that you own. Never pick locks that belong to other people, that you don't own. See, everything's going crazy here because we've had a crazy time. So what I mean by that is don't just every lock that you pass by outside when you're walking down the street, you're like, oh, I know that lock, I'm going to try, I know it has 4 pins, I'm going to try to pick it. Don't do that. We do not endorse using these techniques for any form of perceived or actual criminal activity. Picking locks on people's doorknobs and other locks that never told you to do this even in sort of a passing. That is crime in most places. It will get you in trouble, and it will get me in trouble, and get everyone in trouble. So don't do that. If you do that and you get caught, congratulations, you are a felon. I told you not to do this, nor do I endorse you. So just don't do that. So as a reiteration, do not pick locks that you rely on, and do not pick locks that you don't own or you don't have permission to. Now, I will say this. If someone gifts you a lock to be like, hey, I don't use this lock anymore, you can own it and keep it and, practice lock picking on it. Or, which I've had happen to me, I've had my neighbors in the past lock themselves out, and they didn't want to call the fire department or the police because it could be seen as problematic. And I've had them be like, we're locked out. I have either my kids or my pets in there. They're like dying because it's 8 million degrees. I don't want to call the police so that they have to knock down my door and place the door. Can you please help bypass this lock? And I agreed, bypass that, and that solved that problem. And they gave me permission to do that. So that's the only scenario I can see, and you have to have a lot of trust with your friends that you're allowed to pick a lock that you personally don't own. But I say in general, just don't pick locks that you don't own, and if you have a lock, don't pick locks that you rely on. All the tools and locks that you see here are in my kit to specifically learn and teach how to pick locks. I don't use any of these locks in my day-to-day use. And with that said, I'm going to check on my food one last time, and we're going to finally begin the whole spiel on how locks work, what locks are, and how to use all these wonderful tools here. So just give me one moment. I'm actually going to, again, put this on. We are back. Hi, welcome back again. Let me just quickly check the chat. Now that we have most of the kinks worked out, I have this layout saved, and I now also know I'm going to look into how to reintegrate the chat in the future. I also want to put out for anyone who might be watching that during any of our live streams in this month of May, as you all know, COVID is affecting everyone globally, and it's really hammering the United States. And you probably notice on top there is a charity banner. That banner is for the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center. They are right now using all of their facilities in order to break down proteins into research folding patterns of proteins to figure out cures for COVID. So if you've watched the news and you've heard that there's these testings going on, and also that that different chemicals are being looked at that aren't detergents. Fred Hutch is a big proponent in that. So if you're on the stream, our goal, we would like to hit $200, and we're going to also put a chunk of our money in during one of our streams. But you can put anything you want. You can put $1 in, you can put $5 in. Even if we don't reach our goal, we're still going to donate whatever money is donated to Fred Hutch in order to help fight COVID. So this is a way for you people at home who are hackers, who are learning hacker things, to, while sitting on your butts watching something cool, that you can learn how to fight this terrible disease that's affecting us. So with that out of the way, we're going to begin. I will mention that a couple of times. I also want to note that Fred Hutch is not sponsoring us in any way. We're literally doing this out of pure kindness of our hearts. If you go to our website and our Medium blog, you will find details about all these different ways you can help fight COVID-19. I think in a future live stream I'll have that URL preloaded so that I can show everyone it. But now we're going to begin. So, locks. You have probably seen locks everywhere. This is a simple master lock, like one of these blue heavy boys. You've probably seen this everywhere. You've probably seen these thin brass boys, also made by Master Lock everywhere. You're going to notice I have a lot of Master Lock related things, and you might even see huge, giant like locks that are heavy that, you know, all over the places on Big Business and stuff like that. And of course, most doorknobs, like the door to your entryway to your house, all have are all lock mechanisms to make sure that people just don't go, hey, look, open door, hey, free TV, you know. But also, a lot of people know they exist. You have keys in your pocket, but a lot of people don't know how they work. And so I figured a nice way to start off this stream, just due to all the technical issues, I'm probably going to repeat this in the next stream I do, but I'm going to kind of go over an overview of what makes up a lock, all the different terminology, and some of the base levels of picking, raking, and bypassing, and I'm also going to teach you what those terms mean. So let's begin. So if you were able to have X-ray vision and to see through a padlock like this, it'd probably look something like this. I'm actually going to turn it upside down because I realize that's how the camera is. Ta-da. So it probably looks something like this. This is what is known as a pin and tumbler lock. They've been used for a lot of doors for a long time, and I would say about 90 to 95% of all locks you encounter are pin and tumbler locks. I will also say that the truly simplest base physics mechanics of how pin and tumbler locks are set up, that they work for the same for a lot of different types of locks, and later on in this series we'll kind of get into all the different types of locks you encounter, because there's some locks that just look like bizarro stuff and you're going to need unique tools, but the principal idea of the mechanics behind this are the same. They might not use pins, they might not use a tumbler that looks like this or a keyway that's like this, but they will all work the same. And also, even though this is a clear padlock, the mechanisms I'm going to show you is also what's in your average door lock, such as your front door. So let's get to some terms here. So pin and tumbler lock, why is it called that? Well, the entire mechanism here is known as the tumbler. All of these innards, that is not this part. That's the actuator. That's what the tumbler is going to interface with when it's unlocked and open. And there's so many different names here. So if you see this metal piece here, this cylinder, that is known as the tumbler core. And essentially what a pin and tumbler lock is, and what most locks are, is there a cylinder inside of a bigger thing. So like I often say, it's a cylinder in a cylinder. Now, it's hard to see with this camera, but if you look really close in there, and I don't have like focus or anything, but if you look close at like any locks that you have, and I'm going to kind of angle it, you might see a shiny thing in there. It looks like a little bullet in there. Well, inside, those are called key pins. They look like little tiny bullets. They sit in the actual rotating core. Now, what you can probably see better is there's these little pins that are on top of it. You see all those like metal pieces there. I'm going to try to angle this out because I'm also trying to get used to like the cameras and stuff here. But yeah, there's these little metal pieces at the top, and those are called driver pins. Now, one of the things I love about locks is that most lock terminology, unlike computer security, sounds exactly what they are. Most things are named and work exactly like they sound. So the bottom row of those pins, called the key pins, are called that because they touch the physical key. And then the pins on top of them that look like little soda cans, they're called driver pins because they drive up and down with the little springs putting pressure on them. So you have a cylinder inside of a bigger thing, and you have 2 rows of pins. So how does that keep a lock closed? Well, if we take a tool to try to turn it, and this is actually why you can't turn it, if you look at the way these pins are organized, you will see that they are completely uneven. They're all over the place. They're like up and down all around, as the Sonic the Hedgehog saying goes. So if you take a piece of metal and try to turn it, you can't physically turn the thing because the metal pieces are in the way of what's called the shear line. They are solid metal pieces, these pins, that are stuck in between the surface of this cylinder and the rest of everything else. So there's little pieces of metal that makes it physically impossible that no matter how much force you, well, technically how much force, but human force that you can't use that's humanly possible to turn this thing. It does not work. So then how would you get it open? Well, you would need a key. Now, what makes keys able to open these locks? Well, there's 2 major attributes to a key. First of all, you have this fat bottom up here, which basically allows you to grip a key so you can do a rotational force, because that's going to allow you to turn the core pin tumbler. The second thing is, if you see here, and I know it's really hard, I'm going to work on focusing in the future, but if you see here, if you look at a pair of keys, there's all these different cutout grooves in them. That groove is called the bitting, and what they do is they move the key pins up and down in different positions so that they're in the correct position for it to open. So as I showed before on the inside of a lock, you see how all those key pins are uneven. I'm actually going to stand up for this. How all of these key pins are uneven. They're like up and all over the place. Well, watch what happens when I put the key into the lock. I don't know if you picked that up, but I'll do it again. It is, you see how all uneven they are? If I put it in, they're all even now. And the reason why they're all even is because this bitting has pushed the key pins in a correct order so that all the driver pins are at exactly above the shear line, and all those key pins, the tops of the key pins, are directly below the shear line. So now there is a gap directly on the shear line between the 2 pins, and because there's a gap, there's now a space that if you apply rotational pressure, you can actually turn the pin tumbler, as you can see. And when you do that, when you actually are able to turn the core pin tumbler, you will manipulate what's called the actuator in a padlock. That's this mechanical device where my thumb is, that holds the shackle down, which is usually pressured by a spring, and a doorknob. It will actually it will move the mechanical device that pulls and pushes the door plug out of the hole in the wall, and in this case of a padlock, when it moves the actuator, it opens the lock. So that is kind of a really quick and dirty explanation of what a pin tumbler lock is. By the way, thing I forgot to mention, the driver pins and all this stuff up here is called the Bible, sometimes called the Bible, but we tend to call it the Bible here. But that's all the terminology for the mechanics of the inside of the lock. You now know how the inside of the lock works. But here's a question. What happens if you don't have the keys? Well, this is where lock picking and lock sport comes in. All the tools and techniques you are doing in lock picking and lock sport are designed to essentially emulate the keys without having the keys. And so far I haven't seen anything in the chat. So, what tools are you going to use? Well, there's 2 different sets of tool types. The first are called, well, there's a debate on the different names, but they are called, I call them tension wrenches or tensioners. They are all essentially the same thing. They basically provide the same usage of what that fat bottom did on that key, which is it's going to apply tension or basically a centrifugal force inside of the tumbler. So you would insert it into the keyhole here, like there we go, like so. And what that will do is when you put it in there, you can actually turn the tumbler core. I'm going to get into the specifics about this in a moment, but let me go through the other tools. There's also different types of turning tools. So the first thing you're going to need is a turning tool so you can actually turn the pin tumbler core. The next tool that you are going to need is the actual pick itself. And you probably have seen these in movies and video games, and what they're designed to do is to go in there, and they're designed to push those key pins and driver pins up and down so that you can make them into the correct order to create that gap between the shear line so that you can turn the core with the tension wrench so that it opens. And you're basically doing both at the same time. Now, tension wrenches come in different sizes and shapes. My preferred tension wrench has this little twist bend in it because I usually have better pressure control and it feels better on my fingers. But there's a lot of different types, and I will show you some future types later. But let's try to open this lock. So we get our tension tool. This is known as a bottom of the keyway tension tool, this little L boy. The reason why it's called a bottom of the keyway tensioning tool is because on the lock you have the top of the keyway and you have the bottom of the keyway, and you put this tool in the bottom of the keyway like that. And what you're going to want to do, particularly for padlocks, and the ones you'll probably be practicing on, is to put a very tiny bit of pressure on there. We don't have number gauges for pressure. Normally in an in-person thing, I touch someone or do it. The best description I've heard for the type of pressure is put enough pressure that you would use on your finger to hold a piece of paper up on the wall. If that kind of makes it too tricky, when you put the tension wrench in, you see how when I put some pressure on it, when I put some pressure on it, the core turns a little bit. You see that? So when I put pressure on it, it turns a little bit and then it stops. When it immediately stops, when it resists, that's all the pressure you need. Don't go any further, because what you can actually do is over tension the lock and it will never open. And I'll explain why in a second. So that's how you set that up. I also want to explain that there are many different ways to hold this, and you're going to see me hold them in very bizarre ways because I'm trying to show you visually inside what's going on. But if you keep seeing me reach here, it's because my computer's falling asleep. I have to fix that too. But if you have a padlock like one of these guys, the best personal way that I tend to hold these locks is I put the tensioner in bottom of the keyway. Top of the keyway works similar too. And I take my hand and the top part, see where the top of the keyway is and how it's facing upwards this way? So it points that way. The snaky part's at the bottom. Like if you looked at it, it's like there's a point and then the snakes. So snaky at the bottom and the point at the top. That means this is the top of the lock. I take the top and I put it in the meat of my hand between my index finger and my thumb. I then wrap my thumb around the lock. I use these fingers to stabilize it, and then I take the tip of my finger and I push down with that light tension right on the tip here. And that not only allows me really good tension control, but it also allows me to hold the lock comfortably while you do this. Because when you have a lock, you're not going to be picking a lock, no lock unless it's a practice visual aid like this that I'm showing you is going to be clear. You're going to be doing this. So you're not going to be looking in the lock hole. You're not going to be able to Clark Kent X-ray vision the side of this lock. So you're not looking down the hole. I'm still getting used to the camera angles here. There we go. Looking down the hole or through the side of the lock. So all of your lock picking skills, some of it's going to be hearing, but a bunch of it's going to be feeling. So you will be able to feel and know what's going on. The only reason why this lock is a clear lock is because I'm showing it to you visually for demo purposes. So you have your lock in your hand and you have the tensioner. Another way to know if you're over tensioning if you, let's get this in frame, if you push on and you push too much tension, you see how my finger turned white? That's way too much. Ease off tension. So you want to just, again, once it like turns a bit, or that sort of tension feel of holding a piece of paper up, you're good. If your finger starts turning white around the tensioning tool and you push down, you're tensioning way too much. Ease off of that boy. If you put too much tension, like I said, your finger turns white, it's never going to open. And so while you're putting that little bit of tension on it, right, so you have everything set up, and I'm going to hold it in a very odd way. I'm actually going to experiment holding it in really odd ways, so that you can see what is going on in this lock. So I'm probably going to pick it like, it's the best angle, that's not going to kill me. I'm actually going to hold it really weird and hold it exactly like this. And actually, let's see something here, because the camera's this way. Yeah, okay, I'm going to hold it, it's going to be upside down, because normally I show this right side up like this. Actually, I wonder if I can still do that. Let's see. Okay, this will actually work, so you can see everything. So don't hold it like this. I'm literally doing this for visual demoing purposes. Once you have the lock in your hand, you have it tensioned, like the correct way I was showing you, you take the other tool. In this case, it's called a hook, or more specifically, a short hook. It's called the hook because it looks like a hook, like Captain Hook. So you're going to go in with that hook as you're putting the little bit of tension, and you're going to go in, and you can do front to back, back to front. Let me actually readjust this tensioner. There we go. And you are going to push all these pins in here, up and down. And I'm going to open this lock, and then I'm going to explain to you why this is possible. Now, I also want to warn that I have an issue when it comes to lock picking, to which when the cameras start running, things usually don't work out for me, but I got them all even, and when I turned it, it opened. And you notice I didn't even have the key. So how are you able to do this? Am I like some sort of grand wizard or master? And actually, here's a fun thing, because I have them turned now, it's going to probably be hard to see on camera, but I can actually poke the pins in here, and you can see them go up and down now. Those are those key pins. So how was I able to do that? Well, just like with computer security, what you're doing with a lock is you're exploiting flaws in this lock, or more specifically, you're exploiting the way locks are made. So back when they used to make these to do the chambers in the Bible for all these pins, they used to hand drill them. Now you would think that with modern technology, with automated robots using per pixel math, the entire column will be straight. But look at this, if I can show it to you. Whoop, it's falling asleep. Even with the crappy bit rate, you can see that this is not in a straight line. Some of them are a little bit towards the left, and some of these holes are a little bit towards the right. These are the manufacturing flaws. There's also little other flaws, like the holes cut out in the actual cork tumbler, but just remember that this is not a straight line of holes going all the way down. They sort of like snake a little bit. And what you are exploiting here is what's called the binding order. So when you put the tension, once again, on your lock, and I'm going to show you to you the way you're supposed to do it and the way I always do it, what you are doing is you're binding all of these pins against this turning tumbler. And what you're feeling for when you put in there is some of these are really springy. They offer no resistance. You just can move them up and down, and they seem to be fine. But then you'll get to a pin that's like, seems like it's trying to push back on you, right? So what you want to do is push that guy up until he becomes springy. The way I always talk about with locks is treat the pins as if they were siblings, just keep poking them until they give up. And you'll notice what's the binding order. So in this case, I know with this lock, because I accidentally picked it open without even thinking about it, I know that these front pins are usually really loose, but then you go to the ones in the back, and it's like pin number 6 is weird, so I push that up in a straight, then pin number 7, and then I go back to 4, 3, 2, 1, and these are all lined up. So remember the uneven holes? That means the one that's furthest out binds first. That's the one that you feel that's stiffed up. When you push that one up, because now there's the gap, it's squishy again, the core turns a bit, so now another one of these guys that are out of order is now pushed up against that and will resist when you poke it. So once you do that order, and you'll figure out the order, and if you do the same lock again, it'll happen really fast, they'll all line up, they'll all be squishy, and you'll actually feel the core turn. That's how you'll know it opens, and when you push it all the way, the lock opens. So that is basically what you're doing there. Now, there are a few pitfalls with these. First of all, one of the most very common things that especially affects me is oversetting. So you can go in, and this is why I don't tell people to do this. You don't push the pin, you're just doing it slightly. You're seeing, oh, this is slight, this feels gummy, this feels a little gummy, oh, this one's stiff. I'm going to slowly push that guy up, because if you just go, I'm going to go all the way, you know, Leroy Jenkins, you see what happened there? You can see the key pin a bit. That's called oversetting. What you have done there is now the key pin is also in the way of the tumbler. So even if all these guys are lined up, and I'll actually do that, yep, they're all lined up. No matter how much I push down on the tension wrench, this will not open because now the key pin's in the way of overturning. If you get what is a false set like that, or you overlift, it's simple. You just let go all the tension. They all go back down, and then you put back your tension on, your slight tension, and you try again. Even with more experienced, like more difficult bad boys, you'll often actually see me, and you'll hear me set them up, realize I kind of did the binding order wrong, take the pressure off, reset, and go again. And I do that a couple of times when I'm doing that with a new lock usually, and then eventually it opens. So now that you know all of that general stuff, let me go into different types of tools, because as you notice, this is a short hook. Actually, I can probably use the back of my phone for this. This is called a short hook, and you can see it's like a hook. Actually, that in the future, I'm going to use a piece of black filament to really show off the background here, because I like advertising our thing, but I need sort of a contrast. So I'm actually going to keep my phone for the rest of the thing here. But there's many different, when you get a kit, when you get a pre-made kit, there's many different types of tools. So I just showed you one type of bottom of the keyway tension wrench, and to note, they come in all shapes and sizes, these bottom of the keyway tension wrench. Like, look at the height difference. Look at the height difference between these two tension wrenches. Like, they're the same exact design, but one is obviously really like long tension wrenches long right there. And you might want to use a longer one if you have bigger or longer hands, longer fingers, or to get more control over your tensioning. But really your tension tool is up to you and to figure out what works for what lock. You also might want to get one that's shaped like this. That's the bottom of the keyway. This is what is called a Z wrench or a Z wrench because it's in the shape of a little Z. You can use either side to put them into the bottom of the lock. It doesn't really matter in my opinion. It's more personal preference. You also know that there's no twist in this one. So there's many different types of these tensioning tools, but let's look at the picks. So as I said before, you have a hook here, and again it looks like a hook, like, you know, hook hand, arg, I'm a pirate. The other common pick that you'll often see is what's called a half diamond. Now, why is this guy called a half diamond? Because if you were to mirror this, and I actually should get another one of these in the future, he'd look like a diamond. So it's just half of a diamond. It's basically this little triangle flag poke. Why is that? Well, let's put the tension wrench, my preferred tension wrench, back in. Now, to me, with hooks and half diamonds, it's really up to your preference. I actually started, I was weird, I started exclusively using a half diamond. I now usually do hooks as my short hook as my first go in lockpicking, but basically I've interchanged between these tools, and you can do two things with these tools. First of all, let's get this guy in frame. You can use this guy to poke the pins up and down, just like you would with a hook, until you find the binding order, they're all up the shear line, and it rotates and it opens. Another thing you can do is you can do this thing called zipping. which I'm also going to show with another tool. But what zipping is it's sort of like a bypassing technique. I might get censored for this, but there's like a bit picking, you know, like John Romero made you his that word in picking. Trying to keep this as PG as possible here. So, because I don't care about demonetizing, but you know, the AI bots are all over these live streams, so you never know. So what's going to happen here is zipping is where you take your tool and you put it all the way in the back, and then as you tension, you pull all the keys up and then you pull back, aka the zip sound, and that a lot of times vibrates them all, and you're going to learn this with raking, so they're all at the shear line height because it temporarily throws up those gaps and then everything lines up, so all you have to do is turn and it opens. And that's what zipping is. I'm going to skip ahead and show that they actually make a tool specifically for zipping. It's this crazy guy that's in my personal kit. Now, this guy, see how weird that tip is? This guy is called a stiletto, or gal, I should say. These picks don't have genders. So why is it called a stiletto? Because if you stand it up, it looks like a stiletto shoe, doesn't it? Like, hey baby, how was your weekend? Sort of stiletto. And sometimes you'll get this guy in a specialty kit, and what it does is it's specifically designed for raking and zipping. So you can use the pointy tip of this tool, and you can push all the pins up like a lockpick until they're all even. Although I usually have issues with this one, and I'll get into why with that. Not with the lock, but the tool with this, with most locks, and it opens. But you can also use that tip to again go all the way in the back. Yeah, I'm gonna definitely get into later on why this particular tool drives me crazy. You can lift them all up and zip out, and it opens. And another thing you can do with this tool, and again, it's more of an advanced tool, but I think it's important for when you get used to lockpicking, is you see the stiletto bumps on the other side of this tool. You can use that for raking, and we're going to get into raking. Actually, we can do that now. So you might get some tools in here that, oh, real quick, sorry. I forgot this the last time I demoed. Cool tip. So obviously with this clear lock, we can sit here and count how many pins we have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pins. And if you looked at the keys, which I'm going to grab over here because I flung them, you can see in the groove cuts of the keys, all the pins that we have here. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Obviously, when you go to a doorknob, or when you go to a lock, how many pins are in this lock? Unless you knew the actual manufacturer, or you personally own this lock and picked it, you would never know how many pins are in here. There is a way to know. I'm actually shocked of how many times lock pick teachers forget this to teach this technique. So what you do is you take any tool, and the preferred way I do this, and this is actually one of the reasons why I love the half diamond, is that I use the flat side of this tool. So I don't use the tip. I turn the tool upside down and use this flat end. And what you're going to do is you're going to take the flat end, you're going to go into the lock all the way in the back, and then you're going to lift up, and that's going to lift all the pins up. And then you're going to very, very slowly slide the tool out. And as you do, not only will you feel the pins drop if it's quiet, and we might be able to pick this up on air, you will be able to hear the sounds of the pins dropping. So I'm actually going to put it near the laptop and see if you can hear this. So I'm going to pull back. So you heard that? So let's try that again. Oh, also you don't need the tensioner for this. So yeah, you don't need the tensioner, you just need the tool, the flat edge, you put it all the way back, and we're going to slide back, and I'm going to feel them drop, and I'm going to count them and hear them for this. So let's find out here. So as I pull back, 1, 2, 3. Whoop. Sorry, I had to zip that out real quick. Let's try that again. This computer was falling asleep. 1, 2, 3, 4. So this has 4 pins in it. That's how you know. You're going to feel and hear those pins drop. So now you know that technique. But let's go on to raking. And before I go on to raking, I'm going to let you know about something about raking. Raking involves almost every tool that you see that has weird shapes. That's not a hook, that's not a diamond, and they usually have what we professionally call these squiggly lines. You'll notice how there's like all these different bumps and grooves and snake patterns, worm-like patterns on them. Those are rakes. And what I'm going to show you with raking is that a lot of times, in a lot of instances, for a lot of different locks, they're the fastest way to just open a lock with the pins and not using a bypass. And it looks like cheating, and it feels like cheating because it kind of technically is cheating. So you're wondering if these work way faster than what I just showed you, where you're going with the tension, you're feeling the binding order and all of that. Why don't I just teach rakes and be done with it? Well, glad I asked so you could know. I know a lot of people who start off with raking, and I will be very upfront about this. The 2 groups of people that I usually see who learn raking first are people who are professional bypassers, like they work in the EOD bomb disposal department, they might work in like a military or policing field, they might be like a computer security, a building security contractor, or just a very know-it-all landlord. And no offense against them, because they teach a lot of really good skills, I often see raking taught by preppers. I'm also going to warn getting equipment for lockpicking from preppers, and I'll deal with that. I'll detail that later. But let me explain why learning raking first is a bad idea. I'm always of the big belief that you need to learn how to crawl before you know how to walk, and walk before you know how to run. Because if you were just taught blank walking or just blank running before you were taught those other 2, you'd probably have a really weird and bad run, and you'd have a lot of bad habits that you need to unlearn, and you wouldn't know like the intricacies of like being able to walk and run properly. And that's the exact problem with learning how to rake first. These raking is fine for when you know a lock and you want to test it first and they're low security. But what happens when you get to a lock like this? Now, you can't see it in here, and I'll show you this a little bit later in the stream. But inside are techniques with those pins that are designed to prevent raking, or basically minimize raking so much that it's literally like a 1 in a million chance that you'll be able to do the raking and it will open. And this is what I usually see happen to people who learn raking. They get to a higher security lock like this American lock here, and then go, why can't I open this? Like, I've opened every other lock. And imagine if you're in an emergency or survival situation, like this would throw you off, this would stump you. And the key is you can open these locks, but you can open them with single pin picking. That's what's going to make it work. So the reason I teach you single pin picking is that basically single pin picking, if you know what you're doing, if you know the lock you're working on, if you're skilled and sometimes just really, really lucky or you're having a good day, will open up any single lock. Raking will work for low security locks with no odd pins or odd biddings, which I'll also get into when we talk about, well, how do you make a lock actually more secure? But they will usually not open locks, or have a very difficult time open locks that have real actual security in them. So you will be using single pin picking and single manipulation techniques for other types of locks throughout your entire journey in lock sport. And so that's why it's very important to learn. You know, you have to know how to do little brush strokes in like Bob Ross before you know how to just take that barn brush and just blank everything. Because if you did that, then you wouldn't know how to do finer details. You wouldn't improve your art. It's the same concept here. So with that out of the way, I'm going to show you what raking is. Now, you probably have heard something, and I do have these. I don't have them near me right now, but I have them in my kit, and it is called a bump key. This is, you probably have heard this if you have like a, hate to stereotype, but like a sleazy friend or like someone who's a magician or some crap like that. And bump keys are kind of, so like people always ask, well, why does a bump key work? And the essential thing what a bump key does, I'm not going to go in specifics of bump keys, that will be for a different episode, but I will tell you in general how they work because it relates to raking. Is what it does is, remember I told you about the way the zipping works? It's basically that. It vibrates all the pins at the same time so that because of their manufacturing defects, they all wiggle into the correct positions where those gaps in the shear line happens, and then you can turn the locks. Instead of going in and meticulously poking every single pin to get the binding order and pick resistance and counter rotation, you just vibrate them all. It's quick and dirty, and it usually opens. So instead of bump keys, which I will detail in another episode, why we don't just have like a huge ass ring of bump keys for every single lock thing. I will detail that some other time, or unless someone asks in the chat. We will deal with rakes. Now, the first rake I'm actually going to show off, because this is sort of more of like a compensation thing, because even though we use the word rake, there are actually different types of rakes that use different types of techniques. So this is called an S rake or a snake rake. And again, the language makes it simple. Why is it called a snake rake or a worm rake? Because it has a little wiggle in it, like a snake or a worm. Looks like a little S. If I actually turn it around this way, it sort of looks like an S. So S rake, snake rake, worm rake. If you see the squiggle like this, like the small hump and the big hump with that squiggle, that's what these type of rakes are called. And remember how I talked about vibrating those pins? So I'm going to show you here. You're going to take your tension wrench, you're going to put that in, and you are going to put pressure on it. And what you're going to do with snake rake is you're going to point those humps towards the pin. So that's the top. Humps means the top. And we're going to go in, put it all the way in the back, and we're going to go back and forth, and that's going to vibrate all these pins to open. Now, if you want to know the pressure and technique, imagine you brushing your teeth, except your teeth are down here. It's the same fast motion, and you're doing the same amount of pressure pushing up on the pins to do that. So the same amount you would do just brushing your teeth. So we're going to put that little bit of tension. I'm going to go in and cross my fingers if this works. And it opened. So I'm going to do that again because I can probably do that faster as I drop a pick. You can usually do this super fast. I'm just holding it at a weird angle so that everyone can see. So I'm going to put that in and then wiggle it. Remember, humps facing towards the pins. See? Look, that was like barely a second. And it opened. So that's the snake rake. Another rake that works similar to a snake or S rake is anything that has 2, 3, or even 4 humps in it. Now, I don't have, there's other ones that you can use that I don't have, but this is known as a double peak. Note how I said it's the humps towards the pins. We don't count these pointy guys that were called the bottom of the W. We don't use the top of the W, we use the underside. So that's 2 humps, so it's known as a double peak rake. There's also a triple peak rake, also known as a Bogota, which is always a fun name to say. And you can use it similar to an S rake, and unlike an S rake, you can also wiggle it up and down as you're doing the brushing motion to vibrate those pins open. So I'm going to take my double peak, and again, I'm going to put a little bit of pressure. Try to line this up with the camera, put it in there in the back and forth brushing, and it opened. Just like the snake rake here. I'll show it to you again so you can see how this is not a magic trick. See? Opened. Now, on to our final common rake, because you know there's also really custom and unorthodox tools, is this guy. Now, he looks complex, right? Look at all those bumps. So if you ever see a rake that has all these crazy bumps on here, that is called a city rake. There's a debate about this. Apparently it's called city rake because all the bumps look like a skyline here. looks like a skyline, like on the horizon, like if you're looking past the Hudson River and all of its pollution, whether it's to New York or New Jersey. Some people think also because since this is a very common rake, this rake has a long history and of its design, that it was probably developed in a lot of cities independently, and it's often most commonly seen in the city. Whatever it is, anytime you see these multiple bumps, we call it the city rake. Now, the reason why a city rake works is it's essentially, as Bonzi and Bill once said, a poor man's bump key. Because if I put a key like the one we have for the lock next to it, you'll probably notice something. I want to get my thumb out of the way here. There we go. Look how much that S rake vaguely resembles the bump pattern in the city rake. Basically, the city rake is designed to, like, these are the most common in-between patterns of cuts in a 6-pin lock, and of course the less pins you have, the less you have to worry about in terms of opening it. So even though sometimes you might have to move it in and out slightly, do not do the same techniques as the previous one where you're raking it, because you will break this, you will file down the bumps on it, and eventually it won't work, and sometimes it'll break the lock. So what you're doing with a city rake instead is you're putting your tension, just like with all the previous picks and rakes, but what you're doing is you're putting all the way in, and because now it's matching up all of those pins, you're just wiggling it up and down because it's the, once you put it all in, right, you're just moving it up slightly, and you're going to wiggle it up and down, and again, that's going to push all the pins and vibrate them all at the same time. You're not going in and out like, you're moving it up and down, wiggle back and forth, little wrist action here. You should know wrist action, all you guys out there and you gals, because you're in COVID, And what that will do is that will vibrate all of those pins, and then the lock will open. So I'm going to try it like this with this awkward angle. So I'm taking it out, put a little pressure, a little tension on the tensioner, put that city rake in, move it up and down, and it should vibrate. Let's try this again, just because I'm going to do a different angle here that you'll see. Put that in. I'm also doing this, there we go. See, I'm also doing this very Euro style. I'll explain what that means in a second, because I'm technically picking and breaking this stuff upside down for your visual aid. So once again, if you can see most of that core, I'm taking it, I'm putting it into the key all the way back. So all these bumps now line up with all those pins in there. This also works if this had less pins. So if I only had 4 pins, it would work too. And I'm just vibrating it up and down with a little bit of pressure. And hang on. See, I'm so not used to these angles. Like later on, I'll do it where I properly hold my hand in, and you'll see how much, like, how fast I can do these. It's just, these are odd. I'm actually gonna move my body to a different angle so I can, like, alright, fine. I'll just do it the way I normally do it then. Put a little bit of pressure. See, that's how normally, you heard that click? That's how fast normally the city rake works on this guy. And that's the city rake. So, we went over different single pin picks, whether they're hooks or diamonds, half diamonds, and we went over different types of rakes. So between those, I think you have the general idea of how a lock will work. Now I'm going to take a water break. I will be right back, and we're going to clear this up by showing tools you can get to learn lock picking. I'm going to show you different security pins and how you can actually do real security on a lock, and I am going to list some more details on a little bit more complex things, and then I'm going to try to pick one of the ones I usually have a really difficult time picking. And if anyone's in the chat, I will answer questions while I'm doing that, and then we will end our first stream, and then we will hopefully have a better stream next time. So I will be right back. Alright, so we're back. See, now without any technical difficulties, this goes by really quick. So we don't have much to go, but I do want to show you something. So I just showed you how you can open locks. Let me show you how you can learn these techniques at home. The tools that I use basically to bring to meetings. Also, what type of real locks, life locks you can get to practice on. Some other interesting techniques, particularly when it comes to security. I will show off a really cool bypass, and then, provide anyone's in the chats, I will take multiple different questions. So, how did I learn how to pick all of this when I was at tool meetings and hacker conventions? Was it like some like secret high-tech spy thing where they had like fancy doorknobs and like, you know, like they simulated a house and had flamethrower shooting? No, believe it or not, you can just get these guys. You'll see my kit in a future video. It's huge. I'm actually going to do a tour of it in a future episode. But what you can actually get are what are called progressive tumbler locks. And let me see if there's one particular one in here. Here we go. So, tool, and this is their logo. See, I told you it's T, 3 O's, and L. And that's the Open Organization of Lockpickers. So TOOOL.us. And you can go to their website and you can get a set of practice tumblers like this. And what they are is these are literally the same metal core that's in here, and it's just the metal core. And what they've done is they have different pins in them. So this is base number 1. That means there's only one pin in here. It's a great lock to give to people so that they can get the right amount of pressure, as well as like get the instant gratification of opening something. Then they move on to number 2, and it's the same bitting, and it's the same amount of pins. Nothing's changed, except with the number 2, there are 2 pins in here, and they go front to back, and they keep going until eventually we get to this bucket, and you go up to, if I can find it in here, yep, you can go all the way up to 6 pins, all the way through. Now, these are really great learning tools. They also are kind of color-coded so that you know how advanced or not advanced they are. They're made by Tool. You can get a set of them for $80. They're really high quality. I recommend it. Now, I know that in COVID times, with people getting laid off, this includes me, and I'm an essential worker, that money is tight. I also just needed another pair of practice tumblers that are also called progressive. These are known as progressive practice tumblers. Progressive not because they voted for Bernie Sanders or something, but because they incrementally increase the amount of pins until you're used to like the full set amount of pins you can get in the average American lock. Not the company American lock, like in the United States. So I found this amazing resource called and they have their logo here, called Lockpick Extreme. It just says Lock X like it's FedEx here, but it stands for Lockpick Extreme. And they also make a set of practice tumblers. They go from 2 pins to 6 pins, and they, plus the shipping if I remember correctly, only cost $40. So if you're on a budget, you can also buy the ones from Lockpick Extreme. These are decent quality. I find these more stiff than the Tool ones, to be honest. I don't think I have I think there's the key in one of here, but I don't have the key right now for the Tool ones. But if I put the key in, they'd be more loose and like well lubricated. These are more stiff. I will say one really good thing about them. Remember, I recommend either one of these, hence why even though I'm a Tool member, this is not endorsed by Tool. We were talking about security before. What will happen here is one of the ways you increase security is not only by increasing the amount of pins, which, by the way, most padlocks, your average padlock like this guy, has a maximum of 4 pins. In fact, almost all of them exactly have 4 pins. Some of them have 5, but most have 4. In a doorknob, 5 to 6 pins, I always assume 6 pins is in your doorknob. So if you're able to pick up to basic number 4 or the 4-pin one in the Lockpick Extreme set, you can now basically take almost any padlock that's not high security like this, any padlock like this, and be able to pick it. That's usually when I give these out to people when they get to base 4. Once you get to 5, and I usually wait to base 6, that's when I bring them to simulated doorknobs, where it's the doorknob tumbler attached to a piece of wood, or like held in by like a clamp, and I have them practice that because most of them have 5, usually in my case 6 pins. But what I like about Lockpick Extreme is that the first advanced real security you'll encounter from guys like these is the bidding. So you'll notice with the 2 pins, it's easy. You know how I know it's easy? Let me get my phone. I know this is easy because look at the key bidding on this. You see how there's very little height differences with these guys. That is what's known as flat bidding. If your house keys look like this, you are in danger because, for comparison, look at these keys. And this has more extreme bidding than that 2-pin key, but it's still what we call relatively flat bidding. And not only does that mean they're easier to single pin pick and rake, but, and I'm going to see if I can do this on camera live, because this will be really funny to show you what I mean by this. If I take, where did I put this, half diamond, let's say, and I get my tension wrench. Yeah, there's my favorite one. Because of how flat the bidding is, I can literally pretty much almost lift all the pins in here, slightly adjust, and it will instantly open. Like I'm going to use the flat side of this, and I'm just going to lift them up, put a little pressure on. Actually, let me do this with the tip. Yep, see? I didn't even touch, I barely touched a single pin. Watch again. I'll try to do this so you can see inside. See? That's because the bidding is so flat. So, expert locksmiths and lock manufacturers that want to make security, if you look at their keys, you'll notice the pinning, up and down bidding is all over the place. So to show you what I mean, let me show you what pinning is like for when you get to all 6 pins. Now this is some bidding. Show you an example. Here is the 2-pin key with the really, see how flat that bidding is, right? It's almost like a straight line. Now watch the 6-pin. Look at that height difference right there, right? It looks like, you know, the frickin' Himalayas right there. And what that means is that, let's say the